My name's Elena Percival. I'm the CEO of Women Who Code. It's a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to inspiring women to excel in technology careers. We've got a fantastic panel planned for you today. Thank you very much for joining us. I know it's the end of the day and sometimes it's tough to keep going, but I promise it'll be worth it. So just as we're getting settled in, I'd love to hear from the audience. How many of you are engineers in the audience? And how many of you are hiring managers? Do we have any like entrepreneurs, founders, investors, press? Okay, just checking. So we're gonna go ahead and kick things off. I'm gonna let our panelists introduce themselves, but we have a question that we want to hear from each of you. So what's one thing that your company or a company that you admire is doing to foster diversity into the workplace? Something that you think is a best practice that you'd like to see more companies doing? And let's go ahead and start, Mariana.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm Mariana. I'm running engineering at Docker. And I'm thrilled to be here at the conference, obviously. One thing that I see companies do that I like in improving diversity is actually making sure to give roles and presence to different kinds of people, women and other segments in actual like a seat at the table. And I've heard somewhere there was a research that once you have enough like critical mass, like 2 or 3, then more will come. And so I like that. I like that more than some, talking about it. I like doing. And to me, that's one of the things that is actually representing that.
I'm Dana. I'm the director of programs at HeavyBit. We're a 9-month program for developer companies. And we work with people like Stripe and PagerDuty. What do I like about? Okay, so I think what I like that I see out there that's starting to happen right now is that organizations are starting to give more visibility to women. In particular, women are publishing under their own names and they're speaking at conferences. So I think it's really important for this visibility to be out there for organizations. Like, to be quite honest, if you can't see a female leader in an organization, then how could you see a path to that level of promotion for yourself? So it's something to keep in mind, I think.
Hi, I'm Wayne Sutton of Build Up, and Build Up is a 501c3 nonprofit. We are a pre-accelerator that focuses on to provide mentorship, education, and access to underrepresented entrepreneurs in technology. That includes African American, Latino, women, LGBT, vets above the age of 35, and so forth. One of the things that we have done that we believe is part of the solution to help create a more diverse and inclusive tech ecosystem is that we have partnered with existing tech companies to provide educational workshops targeted towards underrepresented entrepreneurs, such as work with Google, Twitter, Uber, to do the like evening, after hours, educational, learn how to code, design thinking, build the MVP type resources. And with that, we encourage the diverse community to either launch a tech product or get a job in the tech workforce. So that's just one solution I believe that we've seen that's working. In addition to what this other panelist says, is provide entrepreneurs and underrepresented entrepreneurs opportunities to speak and collaborate in a public forum.
So I'm Adrian Cockcroft, and I work for Battery Ventures, a VC firm. It's originally based in Boston, and they have offices in the Bay Area and in Israel. So it's got some geographical diversity there, at least. We have the general partner that runs the San Francisco office is Chelsea Stoner. I'm very proud to have her running it, and she's one of the very successful investor for us. And we've invested in quite a few companies with female founders and CEOs, so hoping to always increase that percentage. And then I guess on the other side was talking about conferences. I have a lot to do with conferences and program committees, and trying to develop and recognize female speakers and diverse speakers in particular. And there's actually a Tumblr called like the Hasselhoff Award for all male panels. If you get an all male white panel, you get the Hasselhoff Award on this Tumblr thingy. I'm very glad to not be on one of those today.
So I'm going to jump back to you, just because you kind of excited me by your answer. So Women Who Code, we're working to inspire women to excel in technology careers, which definitely means raising your profile. So one of the things that you mentioned was getting women to speak more frequently. What are some of the ways that you're doing that women, or we can, not just women, but anyone can help to make that happen? And what are some other ways that we can help to raise the profile of women?
Sure. So I think in the same way that you do recruiting with any group, usually the best people that you recruit happen through some sort of referral or spearfishing effort as opposed to an open call. I would say take note of the people that you see that are interesting and clever and honestly badasses in their field, and consider raising up their profiles and inviting them to your conferences. I think also, alternatively, there's an opportunity to train people up. So there's a lot of experts who are not very comfortable in public speaking, myself included, and I wouldn't even necessarily say I'm an expert. But I think it's like there's that, when that opportunity is available to people, they often will take it because they know that they need to fill in the gaps for education. And so I guess what I would say is consider putting together training programs. Internally for ourselves, we have a public speaking program, and we very heavily encourage women and minorities to raise their own profiles. And honestly, all the little group is like right now, it's 5-6 people sitting there listening to somebody do a presentation and offering the feedback on the kills, keeps, and the crutch words. And it's just a safe group for people to practice their presentations.
So Wayne, in regard to underrepresented minorities in tech, where is this pipeline occurring, and really where can we improve it?
Yeah, so I think we can improve across all channels in terms of, we look, and I also think like, it is true that there's a pipeline problem. There's also, not true there's a pipeline problem in certain levels of the pipeline. For example, you look at the impact that needs to be made in the K through 12, like that needs to happen like across the globe, right? In terms of increasing STEM, increasing, outreach programs, targeting underrepresented communities, saying like, get kids early in the code, so forth. So you have the K through 12, and then you have the, the college and so forth, and kind of like, the teenagers generation. It's like that generation, they need more role models. They need more examples. They need success stories. They need to see successful, diverse entrepreneurs, more successful women, more successful African-American, Latinos that are actually creating products that are impacting the world, and it's done so they can have better role models. And then in terms of the later stage, we need to see in the pipeline, something I don't think we talk about enough, is on the venture side, the angel side. We need to see more successful, we need to see more diverse angels, therefore to invest into early stage minority entrepreneurs so it can continue with the whole cycle. So what you do that, and then we can at least start to see the numbers that we all put out last year, that the 2% workforce and then the 1% minority venture capital. We need to increase those numbers at least to like 5-10 to have an impact.
So, Mariana, thank you for being the successful woman in tech that you are. We're really, really excited to have you on this panel. So you've got a tremendous amount of experience. What's been the hardest part of growing a team?
I'll talk about the process of growing a team as opposed to when it's already grown. But I think the hardest thing of growing a team is that things keeps changing, and you need to kind of keep open mind to that. Before Docker, I was at VMware. Even there, we also went through a tremendous growth, and same at Docker. We had times where we that year more than doubled, which means that you look at a team and half of the team and more are new. And in fact, we actually had the same at Docker already from the beginning of the year. We pretty much doubled the team. And as you grow, there's this certain sense of like culture and process that you had. And obviously everything is changing, and you have a whole new set of people that know nothing about your culture process, and you need to make room for them to come in and be part of it, yet you also want to work on instilling what you had. And it's kind of there's at Docker, for example, yes, we do have process, but I find ourselves not to try to get too wedded to our process because it keeps changing. We're like, oh, that worked when we were like this size and we could just meet. Now it's like this size, so we need to do something different. So I guess the trickiest part in my mind is how things change is constant, I guess, and things continue to change, and you have to keep open mind. And as you grow, you want to have a sense of what is your culture and how you preserve, but also you change it because it cannot be exactly the same.
So Dana and Adrian, you both work with much smaller organizations and larger organizations, but do you have anything to add from the perspective of like an early stage startup or a seed sort of stage startup who like some of the challenges they run into growing their team?
Yeah, I think so. We work with post-seed companies, and so they're really in that transition period. Oftentimes, especially after they raise their A, that's when they're hiring up like crazy. Like, I know that Docker just raised a huge round, and so they're hiring up like crazy, I'm sure, on the engineering side. And I think one of the biggest challenges is in the early days, you're able to have these one-on-ones and these scrums, and it's no problem because it's a small little team and everybody's like best friends. But as you start growing to a stage where you have too many reports to actually do one-on-ones with, that's when you start having to put into place different types of communication tools, different types of reporting tools, and honestly, you actually need to do this sort of like alignment exercises that in the early days everybody thinks these are bullshit things to do, but actually when it comes down to it, they're useful things because when you have to do the grunt work later on and you don't have somebody knowing why they're doing that work, it is incredibly demoralizing. So I think that's these communication tools and these levels of, I guess, origin story and narrative need to be put in place once you start growing your team and scaling it out.
So you might also be able to add to how needs change as you are growing and what the people needs are, with very large organizations, as well as having the perspective from the smaller organizations.
Yeah, there's I'm going to start with Conways Law, which some of you may have heard of. Back in 1969, it was proposed that the software produced by an organization resembles the communication paths in that organization. So if you have a bunch of teams that talk to each other infrequently, they'll end up building sort of two separate systems with some kind of interface between them. And you can do what's called like the inverse application of that, which is if you want your software to look a certain way, you should lay out your teams that way. So as you grow, you end up building lots of small teams that have APIs between each other, because that's what you want your things to, that's what you want your software to look like. And Docker is a very microservices is part of the kind of culture of Docker as a technology, and this really ties in. So think about it as one or two people build a container. Build something into a container. That is a microservice, got an API, and that's the team. And then they're very autonomous. They can update that independently, and they maintain a stable API. So that way you build out a team that's lots of very small components. And the problems occur if you try and split responsibility for a microservice or building a container or whatever across, say, teams that are in two different continents or just widely across the organization. So you want to own it. And the other thing that you see enterprises get stuck with is that they build processes that are there to prevent bad things happening, and when another bad thing happens, they're another step to the process. And I call it sort of scar tissue development, because basically you end up with this process that can't get anything done anymore because it got too heavyweight. And that drives people out of the organization. So you tend to find big companies get so slowed down and stuck because they can't get anything done anymore. And so the trick then is to come up with local autonomy, giving people, ownership over a service. So instead of being you're on this project, you deliver it, throw it over the wall, move to the next project, which a lot of enterprises do, you're actually owning a service. You typically, with web service type systems, you own something in production and you own it until it's no longer running. So you're done when your code's no longer running and you've managed to turn that thing off. But you're on call all the time until you get rid of that code base. So it causes the right incentives in the system. And you can scale organizations to be quite big as long as they're structured as lots of little microservices with APIs. And some of those APIs aren't even your company. You're talking Google Maps or Twitter or something else, right? You're calling all of these other APIs to get something done. And the fact that somebody's sitting in the cube next to you, calling her API is no different to calling Google Maps API. You still have a stable API between them. So that lets you build small teams that can scale into big organizations without getting stuck into all of these sort of locked down, bad process kind of environments.
So what's missing in how teams are managed today? And I think that you have a lot of different perspectives, so I'd like to hear from, one or two of you on this. Maybe Wayne, do you have a perspective from, as organizations are just getting started?
Yeah, totally. If I look at, kind of core what the theme of the session is and my focus and how the ecosystem is now, I think like what has been missing is that, a lot of responsibility, core values, early communication, and accountability for early stage founders to really think about the value and the culture of their company in terms of how they make hiring decisions, company culture that, even though it's a private company, they're not really thinking about the growth and the impact of the type of people they're going to hire later, and how if they start off with a certain company culture, then it could actually hinder retention, whether it's hiring, keeping women on board or other minorities, or saying you might find a great engineer, but the company culture is not fit for the engineer. They're going to go work at a Google or Facebook because they don't like the company culture. So I think what could be done more is just accountability, be mindful of the company culture, set core values early on, and then with accountability, I look at who should hold these early stage companies or accountable. I think it's themselves, and also I think it's the venture investors, because it's like they're investing, they putting their name, their time, their money on the line. It's like scale, grow. But you look at the ecosystem, it's still like predominantly dominated by men and mostly white males. And so it's like, how can that ecosystem change to say meet how the rest of the world is changing? You have to add some sort of accountability with that.
So when I talk to companies, I often ask them to think about their growth with like 10x growth in mind. Like you're building a product, you're building your company culture, and I think that goes back to what you were saying. And that's the kind of thing that's just assumed. But as you grow, it becomes more important and more clear why it's important, but that doesn't mean it should be overlooked early on. So do one of you have something to add specifically from your experience or what you've seen with companies?
Yeah, so, again, I'm going to reiterate that the reason why people should be paying attention to things like OKRs and to the narratives of an organization is because that's your rallying cry. I think a lot of, when we talk about diversity, people are like, why do I need a diverse organization? To be quite honest, in some cases, if you're an early stage company and you've got a bunch of dudes that went to college together and they're totally in sync with each other, that's actually a very easy way to start a company and do things quickly and be together on an early stage product. But when it comes down to it, is the reason why I think you need to have a diverse organization is because you're losing out on an incredibly large track of intelligent human beings who could add to the design process. And the idea being that user experience shouldn't just come from the monoculture, because that's not how you build a company. I don't know, but I think there's another side of it there where people will say Steve Jobs is a single design entity that supposedly, created an entire company and an entire engineering culture. I don't know.
Well, I don't know if this is answering your question directly, but just observation on like today is that there's this kind of a bit of mentality of like quick wins. And I sometimes wonder, first of all, it is faster to develop things and faster to take them to market, and all the cycles are faster and cycles of change are faster. But I sometimes wonder whether we really build like things to last, or we creating like this micro, cultures that come in and they're not like really to last for a long time, long time. I mean, I can tell you that I'm going back to hiring, interviewing a lot of people. Many of them spend 2 years and move from one place to another. And I'm thinking, hey, if your team built from people that are just there for 2 years and just go on and go on, are you really gonna build something again that lasts? And just talking about back to is it something that's missing today? I don't know, maybe it's better, maybe this, but I sometimes wonder about that, for this kind of let's win quickly mentality.
I also think that the state of the whole market has changed, right? Just in terms of internet users, the predominant culture in terms of, look at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, social networks, look at the entertainment industry, look at all these core verticals that everybody's building products for, whether it's AR, VR, machine learning, all this technology. The core user base is going to be changing so much in the next 5-10 years, right? It's the first time in America where the K through 12 generation, which we're talking about millennials, are mostly diverse, graduating from high school. So we look at terms of what are we building, who we building it for, who's going to be the buying power, and how we really target those products for those individuals. If we don't integrate from a founding team, a hiring, and a listening, and a culture perspective, there's going to be a huge disconnect in terms of who's using the service and how things are built and who's designed for it.
So just to kind of build on what you've said there is, what we're seeing is there's a much smaller number of women who are in minorities who are founding companies, and I think the two of you might be able to both add to this. So there's data that shows that they're evaluated differently when they're pitching. What are some ways that we can make sure that women are getting the opportunities to pitch, first of all, and that they're being or women and minorities are having the having an opportunity to be heard. I don't know if differently is the right word, but since they are just due to kind of hidden biases. Are you seeing that women and minorities pitch differently? What's something that we can do? What's a?
I mean, Adrian, you're seeing. I don't know how many diligence meetings you're doing, but honestly, what's the criteria you're looking for when entrepreneurs come into the room, regardless of whether or not they're women, minorities, whatever? I mean, I guess that would be offering that level of education to people to know how to hack the first referral that gets you in the room or whatever is potentially the way to get more female founders funding.
I guess there's so how to approach that. So if you think it's just to describe the way typical VC firm operates. In any 1 year, you will meet with thousands of distinct companies. Probably several thousand companies will have a meeting with somebody at the firm. Out of that, a few hundred, and we're a reasonably large firm, a few hundred hot deals something that goes far enough that we do the due diligence, right? You go and you call the people that they say they're working with, and you do the background checks. So a few hundred make it to that, and then we make maybe tens of investments a year. So that's a typical mid-sized VC firm pipeline. So we look at thousands of, there are many meetings a week trying to figure it out. The things that I'm currently focused on are trying to find very early stage people that have yet to leave that parent company where they're still working away, and they're looking at, okay, I've got this idea, I want to leave, I want to form a company, and you've got, do you have the right background for that? So there's a profile of people that works for. But the most sort of fun part of my job is brainstorming what would that company look like. What part of the market are you going after? How would you build your team? What are you going to do? That's actually an interesting you're right in the very early stages. And some people never leave that parent company or wherever they're currently working. But that's the very early seed stage piece where you get to brainstorm the whole idea and whole go-to-market and how long is it going to take and all those kinds of things. So that just trying to find people. One of the reasons I go to lots of conferences and talk to people is I'm trying to flush out those people, right? Because they go, oh, you're interested in that. So that's what I'm trying to do. We also do late stage investments. There's all kinds of things. There's a big scale here, but generally, if you're looking at an idea, there's got to be a reason for a company to exist. The hardest thing is to create a brand new category, something that's never happened before or has no marketplace, because there's no market. It creates a market. So companies that create markets are probably the biggest outcomes, but they're the hardest to get started, because you've got to have the sort of bloody-minded, I'm going to do it anyway kind of thing. And you see if you read the Elon Musk biography, you see somebody like that, right? That's an incredible drive to create a completely new market. Most of the time, what I see is like an engineer that's found a piece of pain that they want to go, I do this stupid thing and I could build a better version of this product, right? So you're trying to build something that's going to fix some piece of pain. And then the question is, so why are you going to succeed? Are you going to do it better or faster? Or are you leveraging a change in the underlying technology space? And Docker is one of those disruptive things. Things that used to take a long time now take seconds. What can you do with that? Developers are now owning stuff in production. What does that do? So there's these times when there is a very disruptive change where all of the stuff you used to know that was true, because it always takes weeks to get machines deployed, now it takes seconds. What does that do? So when you get to leverage something like that, you get to build the next generation of a product. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking for, those sorts of ideas. Make sense?
Yeah, well, I'll let add, because I feel like we are seeing, it's not near the saturation as the rest of the other demographics, but we are seeing more women and more underrepresented entrepreneurs start to pitch and get on stage and participate because of the market, the press, and more coverage, more panels like this are happening. So that's great. And from a pitch perspective, I feel like women are doing an awesome job at pitching and delivering great pitches. But we still need to see more of them get invested, like more funding on the seed stage, pre-seed, seed, to get to where they're talking to our fellow panelists on the later stage, Series A, Series B, and so forth. So what can we do to increase that? Then it's like everybody's room, all right? If there's every female underrepresented entrepreneur, every individual's room met or told a story of they met this female entrepreneur, this underrepresented individual, they was great, and we refer them to a job or speaking at next conference or next year, that increases and it just replicates itself. Or it's to create a network of like all the women at DockerCon. How can you create that list, or maybe probably already exists, and then that group continues to say, well, next year we're going to present these panels and so forth. And it's continue that cycle, because that's how the ecosystem works here. It's all networks, it's referral in, and you have to start with encouraging everyone to continue to do their part.
Comment. There was a conference in San Francisco the last couple of years called FlowCon, which is about continuous delivery, and it was mostly driven by Jez Humble, and he set out to have a 50-50 mix at his conference of speakers, and then afterwards he did a full survey of all of the things, and he found that the female speakers were on average more highly rated. So he said, I'm going to force the quota, then I'm going to check the quality. And he got better quality, right? And better response from the audience. So that was a really great validation. And what the other things, more anecdotal, but really diverse teams have better outcomes. And you can there's a bunch of evidence around to support that. But the diversity of opinion and background means that the teams generally produce better products and they work better as a team. And you can get, if you get everybody being too close together, then they end up hiring people that are only like them, and that's something you have to watch out for and try and sort of break up those teams or just get some more diversity into them.
Okay, so I have one last question for all four of you that hopefully we can answer quickly, and then we'll go to the audience to ask some questions. So in your hiring or your investing, what is, besides the skill set for the specific role, what are some of the attributes that you kind of look for in people right now? So I'll start with you, since you're doing a lot of hiring at the moment.
Yes, by the way, we're doing hiring, if you didn't get the message. So yes, I think what I'm looking for, obviously, like you expect a certain skill set and experience, so that kind of goes without saying, but there's a set of intangibles that go with it that I'm looking for, and these are the things that truly kind of mark the employees that are going to be exceptional employees. So, employees that go above and beyond, work well in a team, all of these things, all the people we like to work with and we like to have in our teams. And we recently have done kind of this a bit of like a work of let's define a set of behaviors that define our culture. And one of the behaviors we listed I really like in particular, and this is like people who take the trash out, right? There's like do the things that nobody wants to do, and so that will an example of something we're looking for. So I think the trick is obviously how do you know that when you interview people, and are still looking for good methods to find that, but obviously history is the best predictor of future. So looking at the past and see how these employees were placed and in the organization, what was their experience, what's their team members say about them, etc. Usually is a good predictor. But again, a lot of the intangibles is what set apart great employees from exceptional employees.
I'd say I'm hiring a bunch of people too, and we actually have a site called devcodejobs.com, which is 24 member companies all hiring for various roles. I would say for myself, independent thinking. So I want somebody who will ask forgiveness rather than permission, like JFDI, honestly, because we're small enough teams at this point that it shouldn't be me coming up with the ideas for somebody else to do their job. They're probably a better expert at whatever they're doing at that given moment. And then secondly, empathy, because if you can't figure out that you need your team to do your job, then that's going to make it harder for you to do your job.
Yeah, I'm glad she said empathy. That's something I was going to say also. Really look for somebody with empathy, because that actually, I believe, with empathy and compassion, it helps you make better decisions, because allows you really to think not only from yourself, but from the perspective of others. So someone with empathy, compassion, someone with just a mindset of getting things done, like they don't talk about it, they really going you have an idea, you build it this weekend, you do it this weekend. So somebody who's just tangible, going to get things done, and somebody who thinks that literally that they can change the world. Like there's the perception of that. We love the Steve Jobs quote. It's like, the people who actually think they can change the world are the ones who are crazy enough to do it. Paraphrasing on that. But with having a mindset that you can think you can change the world, it says that how big you think. So someone who thinks with crazy big ideas, big vision, and so forth. Because with Build Up, we have our pre-accelerator program, so we look for founders with those attributes.
So there's sort of different things for founders. One of the problems with being a founder is that there's like at least 10 different things you have to do in a company, and when there's only 2 or 3 founders, you end up wearing 4 or 5 hats, right? So you've got to be able to figure out somebody that's able to do multiple jobs at the same time, and you've got to have a lot of passion about the thing you're doing. So that's kind of the founder piece. But I wanted to talk a bit about the Netflix culture deck. I was at Netflix when we wrote helped write. Reed wrote it, but we all reviewed it. I was in sort of management offsites where we went through that. And culture in most companies is accidental. It's whatever happened as the company got bigger becomes solidified to be the culture. And Netflix was very intentional. Well, it was still small enough, you can still change. If you have a handful of people, you can decide what the culture is going to be. Once you get to be hundreds of people, it's very hard to change because the culture is the shared understanding that everybody has. What's the sort of common shared values? So being very explicit about culture early when you're still small enough to change it. And look at, go read the Netflix culture deck. Nordstrom published a culture deck. There are a bunch of people out there publishing this is their values, and go find the bits that you like about that, write your own one, and make sure that it's sort of published somewhere when you're hiring. It's like people that interview at Netflix, part of the phone screen is, have you read the culture deck? If you turn up and you haven't read it, it's basically an instant interview fail, because you're supposed to have already got your head around the company operates in this way, it has these kinds of ideas and values, and if you find unless you have good questions about that, you're not at the right place. So it's like a filter for people who would want to work at your company. So putting a lot of things in there that are going to attract the people you want. That's the key.
Great. So does anyone in the audience have a question?
I'd like to hear if there are any specific steps, perhaps practices, exercises, cultural imperatives that you've either taken in your teams or seen implemented for creating inclusive teams, so that we're not just hiring people who are diverse, but they can come, they can work effectively, and they're happy and they stay. Especially if those are things you've seen implemented with exclusive teams to make them become inclusive environments.
I'll jump on a little bit. There's a lot of talk about ERG groups, right, and employee resource groups, and how those play a key role for a company, especially when it gets along the size of 50, 100, a couple hundred employees, and the organization has this culture set and so forth. Then it usually starts small, a couple women, LGBT, African Americans, Latino. So I want to create this employee resource group. We're going to have our meetings. And then they want to have additional company-supported resources to support their efforts in terms of hiring, and then also make sure the culture fits, kind of like they want it to fit. So what I've seen work is employee resource groups set up. Everybody from CEO, managers, founders, HR, support those employees resource groups financially, participate in monthly kind of surveys, and additional help with the hiring process. That's something I've seen that's being implemented with a couple of tech companies now, is that you take the diverse employee resource groups along with HR and then with the technical managers, and they collectively make a decision in terms of the candidates out of the pool to hire. So it's not just use the hiring manager, which is just most of the time a white male engineer doing the hiring decision based on what his expectation and his culture he thinks. So it's more of an inclusive decision. So there's not a lot, but employee resource groups buy in from the top down, and then so that's what I'm seeing right now.
I can throw out a few more really quickly. Hidden bias trainings, analyzing employee reviews for hidden biases, making sure that employee perks also are valuable to diverse team members, just to name a couple really quickly.
I had a question around education for STEM for women who are in grade school and high school, to sort of increase the funnel for folks and give them examples of diversity in startups and in technology. I have two daughters who are interested in STEM careers, and they're starting to learn how to code and things. So I think more of that increases the input funnel and kind of gets people on the track of high-tech careers. So could you comment on that?
Yes. So I mean, this is very important, and there's countries out there right now that have done this, but it needs to be part of the core curriculum, and I believe it needs to be part of the core curriculum in elementary schools so that we're not missing out on the girls, the low-income students, the minorities, and so that they also will have the opportunity to pursue careers in technology. And we're looking at being 1 million engineers shy of the market needs in the next 5 years. So we need to be bringing a lot more engineers into the market quickly.
I am sort of wondering, like, how many people in this room actually have a comp sci degree and like came to engineering because of that? Because it seems like there's, I mean, it's easier now more than ever to actually A, become a decent engineer within an organization, but B, also become a leader in an organization without a traditional sort of path to education around it. And I think that's interesting. I think the Khan Academies and honestly the open source community being able to embrace your contributions without having a graduate degree makes for a slightly more balanced playing field, hopefully.
Yeah, and it also means that companies need to figure out how to hire these people who are coming from the alternative background. So if you've gone to a developer school or you've kind of been self-taught and you haven't spent 2 years sort of preparing for an algorithms interview, companies need to figure out how to hire those people as well.
I have a question. What are your guys' thoughts on recent events regarding Ellen Powell, like personally, and have you seen any effects in your respective industry because of that?
That's a complex one. I mean, I've been following it a little bit. So I don't know that I want to share an opinion, except that I'm glad it came to the forefront, a little bit the issue of women in VC world. Maybe Adrian can comment a bit more. I don't know that the outcome was exactly great, but you know, anything that brings the issue up is in some aspect is good. I mean, I honestly, like, as a woman, one of the issues I have with is sometimes how women appear as victims, right, as opposed to like a very empowered. Like an empowered force, and I'd like to see more representation of empowered women as opposed to the ones that were like, oh, we're victims, you know. So that's kind of a little bit like some of the what you see in the press is more of that. So it's still good that there are titles around the subject, but again, I would like to see more representation of like empowered women talking like in a really empowered way. That's kind of as a better example. I don't know, maybe Adrian, sorry putting on the spot, like VC, maybe want to talk about that?
There's best way to put it is there's lots of different types of VC firms and cultures, like there are across lots of companies, and I'm happy that the firm I'm at has a really nice inclusive culture. It's a very friendly, helpful place. It doesn't have the kind of ego-driven, kind of exclusionary things that I heard about from in that case. So, I mean, that's really all I can say on that.
I get you. Thank you. I want to say that the trial, it brought light to what many people had stereotyped what the culture was in terms of venture capital from this old school boys network. And so it brought real world examples of at a firm that is worldwide known about this behavior and so forth. So what that did is shine light on it. It created a press, media storm, and now more firms are saying, I don't want to be like that. I don't want that to happen to me. So now more firms are actually looking at bringing more women partners, make sure that they behave better. So in terms of the trial, the impact is like priceless. And anything, unfortunately, it has to be a trial that is going to like help push a industry forward to make it more inclusive. But I think it overall has been a positive thing.
it's sort of weird that, I mean, okay, so when it comes to like venture capital, it used to be that everybody looked at the Midas list as like some sort of big status symbol, but when you look at it now, there's, I think funding is so distributed at this point that there is this opportunity to be able to raise through an angel list or somebody like that, something like that. The other side of it is that in this entire trial, it's pretty rare that people actually will point out those women who have been staid and interesting individuals within organizations that are strong, like the Mary Meekers and the Rachel Chalmers at Ignition Ventures. I was just talking about her. She's like on the ADA Initiative board, and she also helped start Double Union. You know, Esther Dyson, for instance, she's like definitely an interesting human being as far as a venture capitalist confirm, and very much like non-traditional, but they're rarely talked about. I think there's more coverage of the car crash sort of situation than there is about it wasn't a car crash, things are great right now, like, or, you know, there's hope, at least. I don't know.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you very much to our panelists.